selected points so as to allow more time for questions from the audience. We bring you now excerpts of the Prime Minister's address and the question and answer session that followed.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Prime Minister.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, Singapore has been undergoing its own generation change, both in the leadership and in the electorate. Changes in the international environment will accentuate the changes which were already in motion in Singapore. The younger generation, like you, have not experienced the last war or the Japanese occupation. And an even younger generation does not know of the communist insurgency and subversion or of the communal riots which preceded our separation from Malaysia. In other words, Singapore has a generation with a different view of the future because it has a different understanding of the past and therefore of the world. Yet, despite this change, I believe there will be continuity in most major policies because policies must meet the special needs and problems of Singapore. Its smallness and its geographic relationship vis-à-vis Malaysia and Indonesia. As Napoleon said, states follow the policy of their geography. I may add as an aside that states also have to follow the logic of their demography. However, there has been a change for the better. Both Malaysia and Indonesia have decided to change their economic orientation and to plug into the international grid of free market economies. And Johor and Batam want to plug into Singapore, which can help them plug into this international grid. Now there's an expectation of change when Goh Chok Tong takes over in November. In a number of articles and interviews in foreign newspapers, which were reproduced in Singapore, Goh Chok Tong has reaffirmed his consultative style of government, his consensus seeking, and a looser rein in government. In fact, the style of government has been changing gradually after the general elections in 1984 and markedly after the general elections in 1988. No two persons are exactly the same, not even identical twins, if they've been brought up separately. The largest single difference in style between Goh Chok Tong and me, however, will not be because of differences in temperament or character, but because of his commitment to team leadership. He consults all relevant ministers and other key parties affected before he takes major decisions. On major policy changes, he encourages his ministers to sound out their GPCs and other backbenchers. This means more time is needed for decisions, but it has the advantage that the decisions are composite ones because different interests have been accommodated. However, it increases lobbying since interested parties know and have time to work on ministers and MPs because they know that Goh Chok Tong will consult the other ministers and even affected MPs. But whatever the style, all leaders face this key problem: how to ensure that their final decisions are respected, accepted, and implemented. In an unsettled or revolutionary situation, a leader has got to be both a nice guy and a tough guy. or he wouldn't survive. President Theodore Roosevelt said in 1901 about leaders, "Speak softly and carry a big stick." In tranquil times, leaders have the choice to speak softly and let the people around them, ministers and aides, carry the big stick. For instance, the Tunku always spoke softly. But people took his words seriously because they knew that behind him were Tun Razak, Minister of Defense, and Tun Ismail, Minister for Home Affairs. And each carried a big stick on behalf of the Tunku. President Suharto speaks even more softly than the Tunku. But whoever meets him cannot doubt the strength in the man. Behind the gentle, smiling appearance is or are decisiveness and determination. And it's not necessary for him to carry the big stick because his key ministers and his armed forces chief do not allow the president's rulings to be flouted. Dr. Mahathir is strong in a different way. From time to time, he deliberately chooses to speak a little louder. And his political opponents have discovered that he wields the stick like a Silat master. My point is, whatever the style of leadership, the big stick is necessary to ensure that the rulings of the leader are observed. Because the big stick was not used on the first group of coup leaders in the Philippines, you remember they were let off with 40 push-ups. There has been 5 further coup attempts against Mrs. Aquino. She speaks firmly and even sternly when the occasion called for it, as during the coup attempts. But coup leaders, the coup plotters, do not believe that any of those around her carries a stick big enough to really hurt them. And because they have no fear of the big stick, there is the danger of another coup. My point is, no leader can be a softy and hope to survive. Singaporeans have known Goh Chok Tong for 14 years, since 1976 when he was first elected. He has still to set his style, but my guess is he'll be more like President Suharto than Dr. Mahathir. He may speak softly, but I think he's no softy. Otherwise, he would not have been defense minister for more than 8 years, and nobody doubts that MINDEF is a tightly run outfit. Nor would he have won the support of other members of his team, which includes several who I know are dexterous in the use of the stick. I was encouraged to see how calmly Goh Chok Tong and his team, I'll use the phrase the team after this for the sake of brevity, I mean Goh Chok Tong and his team because he emphasizes teamwork. This team took the flak over the 1987 arrests of the Marxist conspirators and the 1988 rearrests of several of them. You remember the foreign press and human rights groups were all baying for blood. Had they softened under pressure, Singapore would have been a different place. Of course, at that time, many thought that I was the man behind it. They were wrong. Goh Chok Tong and his team had decided on these detentions. It was also the team that decided to restrict the circulation of the Asian Wall Street Journal and the Far Eastern Economic Review and Asia Week for interfering in Singapore's domestic politics. And they wrote and approved, not I, they wrote and approved most of the letters to the foreign press and made their stand clear in public speeches. The team has shown guts in tackling tough, sensitive, and potentially vote-losing issues. They tackled them because the problems were critical for our survival. I've made a list of them. It's an impressive one. The most, I'll issue it in an appendix, which I hope you'll read in the papers tomorrow. But I think their boldest and the most productive decision was the decision to the decision to reduce pay through a cut of 15% in employer CPF contribution in 1985, accompanied by wage restraint. Let me explain. The easier way, which they eschewed, was to let the Singapore dollar float downwards. This depreciation would have reduced wages without the need to get workers and unions to agree. That was what many people were suggesting, including some academics from the NUS. But then there would have been problems because workers would find their spending power reduced and the value of the CPF savings depreciated. Instead, the team took 6 months persuading workers and unions to accept the pay cuts to make Singapore internationally competitive again. And because it was the right medicine and taken straight, our economic recovery has been solid and high growth is continuing. No government implements tough policies for the sake of being tough, not even me. But a government that flinches from tough decisions when the issues are crucial has abdicated its responsibilities and will leave the country in trouble. Many of the policies the team adopted, though initially unpopular, have yielded results and have gained them respect and support. Popular government does not mean a government must be popular in all acts of government. It means that at the end of its term, its policy should have worked well enough to make it possible for it to be popularly re-elected. There are 3 3/4 years before the next elections are due. Again, let me explain. The present Parliament ends 5 years from its first meeting on the 9th of January 1990, not from the last polling day, but from the first meeting of Parliament called after elections. That was 9th of January 1990. It ends on the 9th of January 1994, and elections have to be held within 3 months, which means 9th of April 1994. In these 3 1/4 years, there will be changes in style and changes in pace of government. But I believe there will be continuity in major policies because the underlying factors have not changed. Our basic strengths and our basic weaknesses have not changed. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister, sir. Can we have the first question now? The gentleman over there.
My name is Ko Chai Kiet. I'm from Science first year. I would like to have a question with Mr. Lee, please. Mr. Lee, sir, will Singapore be a more open society with greater freedom of press and expression? And will the oppositions be encouraged to develop? I thank you.
I think you have already seen Goh Chok Tong's team's style. As I've said, since 1984, they have really been the prime motivators. And since 1988, after the elections, they have been in charge, and I've been just overseeing what's been going on. It's likely to be much freer and easier in this sense that there is now a more educated, broad-based middle class. Second, it's more articulate, it's more knowledgeable, it can express its views, and is prepared now for maybe 2 years to sign its name, to stand up and be counted. That's a very important facet of any democratic society. You don't hide behind somebody. You stand up, you state your view, you are counted for it. The Asian culture, particularly the Chinese, is always to wait for somebody to say it, and if anything goes wrong, pretend that you've never agreed with it. That's not possible. If you demand the right to have a say on the decision, you must accept the responsibility of being wrong and being blamed for it. That's what I'm here for. If I'm wrong, I carry the can. So I see a gradual evolving of a more consultative, more discursive, more argumentative society. Helping this trend is the demolition or the bankruptcy of the communist problem. Up till December last year, when the Malayan Communist parties signed an agreement with the Thais and the Malaysians to destroy their arms, subversion and insurrection has always been an aching problem, because we know that in our midst are assassination squads and underground agents. I'm not saying they're going to disappear because they say they've burned their arms, but what I'm saying is they have now acknowledged that it's a failure. Worse for them, it's been demolished worldwide. So a great problem has been removed. But of course, there are certain areas where you venture cautiously. It doesn't mean that we've become a homogeneous society. There are still so many Chinese, Indians, Malays, Eurasians, Pakistanis, and others. People don't like to be called others, but it's a blanket phrase. And they are touchy and sensitive and take offense when points are made inelegantly or untactfully. So the press has to understand this, and they do. The Chinese press is very careful about what offends the Chinese. The Malay press is careful about what offends the Malays. I see the editor of Berita Harian here, and I wanted to ask him why he, when I was reading Goh Chok Tong's speech the other day in Berita, I found large chunks of it missing. Because he felt, I'm sure, that it's better left unsaid. Goh Chok Tong says, stand tall. So he said, stand tall. But he then said how they must stand tall. And that was left unsaid. No, but that was the gist of the message. It was in the English press, it was in the Chinese press, but it became too sensitive for the Malay press. So I'm afraid there are certain areas that we still have to tread gently and carefully. We are not a homogeneous society and not likely to be one for a very long time. But we can gradually desensitize issues or areas which were hypersensitive. So the answer is yes, I think it'll be much more flexible, much looser, but at the same time, I don't see basic issues having changed. This has always to be a tighter ship.
My name is James Gomez from Arts and Social Sciences, Year 3. I would like to direct the following question to the Prime Minister, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew. Sir, with increasing stability in Singapore and easing of world tension, do you foresee the disposal of the Internal Security Act, which empowers the government to detain people without trial? Thank you.
I see the need to use this Internal Security Act radically reduced because of the communist collapse. I don't think it is likely that they can win new converts or make subversion the same threat. When the myth of invincibility, that history was on their side, they are the wave of the future, they can generate a certain enthusiasm, the urge to bring about spectacular changes in society rapidly, and suck in the idealists, as they did in my generation, and they did in the generations in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. I think the 80s, they started wobbling, and in the 90s, I believe it's almost impossible. You can get anarchists, you can get Trotskyites, you're not going to get hardline, disciplined communists. But that's not the end of our troubles. You're going to have extremists of various sorts, and we give up these powers at our peril. You know, we arrested 4 mystic types who were collecting weapons of all sorts in preparation for a bloodbath. This was about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. I can't remember the name of them. They weren't the Silat group. What was the group called? Can you remember? It included 1 police officer. You're going to have this recurring from time to time. People who, fortunately, they are fringe groups. You leave them, they become mainline groups. That's the lesson of Sri Lanka. Every time I read about Sri Lanka, I ask myself, could they not have stopped it before it got to this stage? Because at this stage, it's not stoppable. Jaffna Tamils versus Sinhalese. They have been on the same island for 2,000 years, different parts of it. Jaffna Tamils in the northeast, Sinhalese in the south. The British brought them together. Railroads, communications, recruitment of the civil service by competitive examinations, and the Jaffna Tamils came south and took up many of the civil service jobs. Then came the rivalries after independence, switched from English to Sinhalese as the official language in order to exclude the Jaffna Tamils from the civil service, and so on and so on and so on. In reaction, the Jaffna Tamils organized for federal separateness. Eventually, they got nowhere. Finally, they went for Tamil Eelam, which means independent state. And the Tigers and all the rest of it. If, right from the word go, the government had been committed to maintaining a plural society, and any group that advocates separateness had been dealt with, they would have dealt with fractions of society. Detain them 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. Cut off their influence, isolate them, debunk them, release them. It would never have come to this. Now, it cannot be reversed. There's so much passion and hatred. You're going to have Sri Lankan maids for the next 30, 40, 50 years. Well, what else is there to do? You're not going to have economic development. You're not going to have investments. And I suggest to you that we would be foolish to believe that we have become a nation. We are just on the way to becoming something resembling a community. You therefore need these powers to stifle destructive groups before they gain too much influence and power, before they've aroused so much emotions that they become mainstream groups. But it's left to the younger generation, because if all of you think so and you influence the younger generation of workers, eventually they will elect a government that says, right, let's abandon it. Then I say good luck to you.
Thank you, sir. Next question.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. My name is Joanna. I'm from Arts and Social Science, Year 3. I would like to direct this question to the Prime Minister. Will the future governments of Singapore opt for more popular policies to gain popularity with the people of Singapore? Thank you.
I think all governments want to be popular with their electorate. That's part of the business of staying in government, of winning the next time. What becomes troublesome is if you are influenced only by the popularity of issues of the moment and you govern by it, then you leave the country with no coherent policy. If you keep on taking straw polls and you say, right, what is it they want? This is the majority, and you go along with it, then you can coast along, but in the end, what the people want often is an incoherent and sometimes contradictory group of desires. Let me explain. And this is one of the problems Mrs. Thatcher faces. They have taken polls. You know, Mrs. Thatcher wants a more dynamic economy, which means a more dynamic workforce, more entrepreneurs, more keen workers, more productivity consciousness, all the things which we've been advocating. Therefore, she's a great friend of Singapore. That's a fact. I mean, she has been unrestrained in her commendation of what we've been doing because she's been trying to do the same. But the difference between the British society which she inherited and Singapore, which I inherited, were profound. I inherited an open society, no formed views, and we shaped those views. We molded the biases towards merit, towards excellence, towards competitiveness, towards high performance. She inherited a society that was riddled with class hatred and divisions. It's the product of over 200 years of empire, the rulers and those who were ruled. The difference is profound. It's in their upbringing, in their accents, in their dress styles, in their manners and mannerisms. The way you eat with a fork and spoon will show you to be either of the upper class or the lower class. And tremendous underlying resentments. She's been trying to demolish that. But because of this guilt complex of the upper classes, after the war they promised them equality. cradle to grave. Everybody will be looked after. So now they have a health service which is ruinous. Doesn't work. You queue up to have a hip operation for 3, 4, 5 years. Why? Because it's for free. The best doctors have migrated to America, and they used to get doctors from India and Pakistan to make up the numbers in the hospitals, national health hospitals. So the logical answer is more private hospitals where good doctors can charge what they like, what the market will bear. And that's strongly opposed. And when they take straw polls, they discover it's opposed by the majority, including those who could pay for it. See, there's a contradiction. So the public itself wants things which are contradictory because they haven't figured it out. Nobody has said, look, if you want this, this has got to be given up. In other words, to put it simply, if you want a society which is that compassionate, where everybody is entitled to the same medical treatment and the same social benefits when they are unemployed, and so that nobody needs to be in want, then you are not going to have a competitive society, which means you won't have a productive economy. So I believe what you're going to have, I don't know how it will actually work out, you're going to have a lot of proposals presented in a popular form. Then when you look closely at it, you'll find that in fact, basic objectives are still achieved. You see, it's like this quota system. This is the car quota. This is the result of a long, prolonged discussion, debate, arguments, all sorts of proposals put up. But at the end of the day, if you look at the fine print, what does it mean? It means that regardless of the rise in incomes, whether it's 8% per annum or 6% per annum, the car population will rise at the rate of 2.5 to 3, at the most 3.5% per annum. So you see the pressures that will build up. The way I solved it was simple. I put it all at the front end. Big hefty sum, you can overcome that hurdle, you have your car. ARF, and up to 175%, and I would have gone on to 250%. They tried fine-tuning. Since they took over in 1984, and especially after 88, they said, let's have user fees. So through user fees, you may be able to increase it by another 5-10% of total cars. I concede that theoretically, that's possible. And if you get the electronic road pricing, you might be able to increase it to about another 10-15% of total car population. But at the end of the day, you either restrict it or you have a logjam. That's a choice you have to make. And their skill will be in convincing you that they have done everything possible to accommodate everybody, but that eventually the desires of different groups conflict, and some groups have to go without.
I'm Agnes Tan, third-year law student. My question is, would the Prime Minister, sir, care to comment on the necessity of a national referendum with regards to the elected presidency issue? Thank you.
It's not an issue. Our straw polls show clearly an overwhelming majority in favor of it. In the last elections, because there was a paucity of issues, they made this into a minor one. The idea being that I was going to give up, therefore I must retain power via an elected presidency. I countered that by saying, forget it. I do not think a national referendum will do any good. You don't govern by referendums. Ask yourself, do you think you will get successive generations of government as determined to create and accumulate wealth and assets in order that you can overcome long periods of recession or depression all the time? Or do you think at some stage, because you have a new generation of voters and leaders, the temptation will be, let's spend it? Now, I give you an illustration. All those of my generation, the old guards, all over 50, most over 60, have asked me, this is overdoing it, isn't it? One whole year of anniversary celebration starting from New Year's Eve. That New Year's Eve bash at the new stadium cost $4.5 million. $2 million went to an American consultant group called Janus or Jansen or some such name, and they taught SBC how to present it. You know, all glitzy, and it's showbiz. And on has been going on. Every day something is going on. The older generation just is out of tune with this. So they say, well, what's going on? I mean, at the rate we are going, we're going to be poor. So I tell them, look, that's okay. This is the new team, and they are younger people. And no young man of 30 or 35 or 40 have asked me this question, so they obviously think it's the natural thing to do. So that in itself is an indication of the willingness to spend. I think better have two keys. The president is likely to be an older person. By the nature of the job and the qualifications that he must have, he must either have been a minister or been a chief executive of a company which is on the stock exchange. So he has been in charge of a budget. In other words, he has a different cast of mind, and he will say, look, I don't think this is wise. If you want to do that, raise the tax. You want to put that to a referendum?
I'm Goh Sun Huat from Arts and Social Sciences, Year 3. Mr. Chairman, I have a question for the Prime Minister. Does the Prime Minister foresee a decline in religious tolerance in the near future in Singapore?
I do not foresee. I have already seen. I start off with 1950. 45, I was too young, too busy with my own career. I came back and started practice in 1950. Religion was not an issue. But then you see, Islam had not gone through a resurgent phase. India had got independence, and a secular generation of leaders were in charge, Nehru. In Ceylon, you had a very westernized elite that took over. Buddhist nominally, but very accommodating of other religions. And that was the mood throughout the world, and Singapore and Malaysia was part of that milieu. The climate has turned harsher. If you read Mark Tully on his book on India, he's the BBC correspondent in India, he points to Mrs. Indira Gandhi as the person who made India more Hindu. Because according to him, she was faced with a different situation, and she decided to rally the North, which was Hindu, by appealing to the Hinduness. Meanwhile, of course, Islam had gone through a resurgent phase. But now it has a political tinge to it. It's a riot about power, about the way the Hindus were governing India at the expense of what Muslims claim to be their rights. I did not expect this to affect Singapore, but it has. A resurgent Islam is a fact of life. A resurgent Christian group going out proselytizing, evangelizing, was totally unexpected. We had always taken a free and liberal attitude. And we assume that people will be sensible and live and let live. But you have this evangelist man called Seward, Nick Seward, some redemption church. What does he call himself? Seward. He says, go out and convert the Muslims. You are entitled to do so by the Constitution. Well, that's not very helpful, is it? It's reached a point where finally the Buddhists came to see me and said, would I open their conference? Because they also feel, what's happening? I thought we were going to live and let live. If this is what is going to happen, I'm going to assert my rights. So I accepted. And he gave me beads and so on. Well, I accepted it. Because nominally I'm a Buddhist. Now, that is the secret of tolerance. That you have a generation in charge, like me, by and large, secular in our approach, definitely in how to govern a country, and only too ready to concede the spiritual to personal beliefs, to whichever religion or religious group can convince you, provided the two are kept separate. That the religion contests your right to believe in certain values, but not to the extent that you push a government into implementing those values at the expense of other groups. Muslims tell me that's not possible. Islam is a total, all-embracing philosophy. The charismatic Christians tell me the same. And if this goes on, we're going to have unpleasantness. Friction there already is, clashes are coming. And my simple position is, let's stop it before it's too late. It's all silly. However hard the Christians can try, they are not going to make Singapore a Christian society. It's just not possible. They have tried in China, it failed. There's something about ancient civilizations, both India and China, the Christians did not convert. They converted segments. You may say it's superstition, that Kuan Yin or Tapa Kung are all superstitions. You may say Ganesh, with his blue face and mighty arms, is again superstition. But it's given succor, comfort, relief to successive generations for thousands of years. Who are you to say that your Bible is not superstition? They have converted whole island communities like Fiji. All the native Fijians have become Christians, but not the Indians in Fiji. So I tell these Christian groups, let's have a sense of proportion. Let's live and let live. You're not going to change the world. Maybe you change a few individuals for a very brief period of time, maybe a few years. He gets excited and he's seen the light. But he's got He's got to live. And you look at the Europeans. They were the earliest Christian nations. They're not excited. Their churches are being deconsecrated and becoming bingo halls. So, why do we need to be excited? But we are going through that phase, and I think sensible, sensitive, but firm government will ride this patch. Soft government, trying to accommodate everybody, will lead to big mischief.
My name is Lau Yiling, and I'm a first-year Arts and Social Science student. I would like to direct this question to the Prime Minister. Amidst the wealth of successes and achievements which the Prime Minister and his government has made possible for Singapore, which of these achievements, on looking back, gives him the greatest satisfaction as he passes on the government to the new team in November this year? Thank you.
That's a very unproductive question to answer. What's done has been done. What has failed cannot be retrieved or can be attempted again some other time. What really is the acid test, which we will not know for some years, is have we been able to institutionalize the way Singapore has worked successfully in such a way that a less Spartan and determined group of men can still work it. And I hope we have succeeded there, because if we have failed first in institutionalizing many of the things we have done, creating not only the hardware but the software, the training programs that produce the civil servants, that produce the ethos of a competitive but a clean market, which is what I hope the Singapore Stock Exchange and our financial houses will be. If we have succeeded there, have we also succeeded in creating the institutions which will produce the men and women who will man these institutions and make them function the way it used to function and improve on it? But most important of all, have we put into place a government that can ensure that this success goes on and does not peter out? If you ask me what I'm proud of, I say I'm proud of the fact that we have survived, because many people thought we were going to collapse. And I had my own reservations. We created a new way of life for Singapore. For 1819 to 1965, we existed as part of the Malaysian whole. From 1965 till today, we have carved out a different hinterland. The world is our hinterland. We made ourselves relevant to the world. We expected the Malaysians to do what the Indonesians had already done, cut us off. And we had to find a new way of life. And I think that was done, and therefore a success. But that's only half the story. It requires a group of men and institutions to produce successive, more changes, more innovations, more adaptations to fit Singapore to a fast-changing world. The world has never seen a period of greater technological change. It's phenomenal, the way people can travel all over the world, make arrangements in Singapore, pick up your phone, ring up somebody in Frankfurt and says, right, I'll meet you in Paris. It's a different world. And more such changes will take place. Therefore, you need a lively group of men with the agility, with the imagination to seize their chances, like we seized our chances. Everybody today assumes, yes, of course, we are a great, important international junction for aircraft and ships. Are we? We made it an international junction. If you look at the geography, ships, yes, we have to be the point at which you pass from the Indian Ocean to the South China Sea, but not aircraft. If you're going northwards from Europe to Asia, you go through Bangkok. If you're going southwards to Australasia and later on to South America, you can choose either Kuala Lumpur or Jakarta. Why Singapore? We made it a junction. We wrote off in Paya Lebar in 1981, when we shifted to Changi, some $800 million worth of investments for the RSAF. You know, it's like two peas in a can. All we have is one little squadron, and they inherited this big airport. And we had to sink $1 to $2 billion to reclaim land, build the first runway, extend the old RAF runway, build a new runway. The old RAF runway became the slipway, or whatever they call it. New buildings. But we preempted, and we have the best airport with the two best runways in Southeast Asia. It's man-created. It's what comes under competitiveness. You'll miss that. We are still stuck in Paya Lebar. We'll be like Heathrow. You're done for. Others will pass you by. So, if you ask me, I say the biggest single problem is not the past. That's all done. Have you got men with the vision, the imagination, the powers of analysis, and what finally all adds up to helicopter quality? Can you see the broad picture? See where you are, then zoom in and say, that's my niche. That's where it's going to pay for me.